Yeah. So a normal day for me, like it starts at, 3 or 4 in the morning. I get up, spend time with myself, I get up at 3. I'm one of those weird guys that loves the early
Yeah.
morning, go straight to the gym, I work out, come home, eat breakfast, spend time reading, kind of time to myself. I have two kids and a third on the way. It's like the only quiet life in my time, in my
Man.
world.
So what time are you going to bed?
Oh yeah. My wife and I are generally in bed at 8:30 every night, no matter
That's
what.
how you do it. That's how you do it.
Nothing in our lives needs to happen at 11 o'clock. And
Right.
so, and stuff in my life does need to happen at 3. So we go to bed early.
Yeah.
And so in bed early, but then generally at the school by 6, at the high school, I have groups that come in. So we run, strength conditioning classes that run through our gym or through our school almost every 45 minutes. We have a group that comes in before school and then every 45 minutes all the way to the end. So, they're running strength conditioning classes for our sports until like 3:15 or so. Then I jet out of there, run straight to the gym, the other gym with my Olympic weightlifting athletes. And then I coach them from about 3:30 or so until, depending on the day, could be 6 or 6:30.
Okay.
And then I get out of the gym, run home, eat dinner with the family, bedtime, baths, stories, all that stuff. And then, in bed at 8:30, rinse and repeat for 5 days a week. Saturdays, we get to slow down a little bit. Sundays, I don't do anything. So
That's a big day, man.
it's a very big day. Most days that's manageable. Some days I look at my assistants at the school. I'm like, hey, I need to take this class and breathe for a minute.
Yeah.
So it just depends.
Well, that kind of leads me down the path that I tend to go on when I hear about a day like that, because that doesn't seem like a day that I personally can do.
Right.
And I admire your ability to do it, but a lot of that has to do with obviously your regiment, your routine, your fitness. You're doing everything you can to make sure that works for you.
Right.
And I'm curious, as a jumping off point from hearing that, how has your business evolved to get you to the point that you are today? What kind of lessons have you learned, and what are you thinking about for the near term future? Is there a path forward where though that big of a day is not the standard, right?
Yeah.
But you can still deliver the services that you want and still have the business that you want?
Yeah. So our business, I've always loved high school strength. So that's kind of been the jam for me forever. The weightlifting business was never in the plan. Like it was never something that I intended to do, nor something that I thought 10 years ago I'd be doing now. I was an Olympic weightlifter, competed in Olympic weightlifting, and then got some really good athletes that wanted to trust me with their training.
Right.
And so I started coaching them. And then we had a pretty good system set up. It was just me coaching, and I had, 6 or 7 or 8 athletes that I was coaching. My day did not look anything like what I just described.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit. And we were set up just by product of having athletes that were training all over the country at that point. I had one in California, one in Florida, and so I was doing remote coaching already.
Yeah.
COVID hit, and all of those athletes couldn't train in their gyms with their coaches anymore and had to go to different locations and then had to go back to their home gym.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you started seeing these like mass exoduses from cities and going to different places. And so we were just set up to receive a lot of athletes who needed coaching and programming in Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah.
And so COVID hit, we did a couple continuing education courses because everybody was doing it right then, right? Like you were sitting at home, so let's do some webinars. That kind of helped to create a scenario where people saw us for the first time. And then it just took off. And so I have 7 coaches on my staff plus 9 total employees. So 2 operations people.
Wow.
We've gone from 7 or 8 athletes to now we have about 130 or so that all are paying for remote programming. And so much of what you just heard really is a byproduct of like, we just had this massive influx.
Yep.
We're trying to create structure, just like, you've heard the phrase building a plane while it's flying.
Yeah.
We're very much creating foundational things that we didn't have in place before. And so much of that day is like creating a foundation where, like you said, in 2 or 3 years, like that foundation will then be cyclical and supportive. You'll sort of have this like flywheel effect where we're doing these things over and over again. And it has become this thing that runs itself for a little while.
Yep.
I just know that like I've read enough and talked to enough people to know that like that process and those foundations take years to create.
They can.
And so I'm just in that space right now where I'm trying to create those processes so that in a few years really so much of what I'm intimately involved in now is running itself. And I've hired people that can do a lot of things that I was just trying to have to like innovate on early.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
So,
that's a massive component that you hit on just at the end, is hiring the right people that you can
yeah.
just kind of set loose, right? They have the
Mm-hmm.
skills necessary. You're not having to coach them up in all the different ways,
Yeah.
and you just set them loose to grow and build the business. And they're a trusted partner at that point.
Yeah. And I've always said hiring great people is like primary factor number one. They can be a great coach and a terrible person. They can be a
Yeah.
great coach and not a great fit.
Mm-hmm.
Just finding somebody that fits your culture and the philosophy and the brand you're trying to build, and then finding a place for them. Like the person who like really just keeps me afloat, like one of our operations girls. I mean, she never lifted a weight. She never does. Does not do Olympic weightlifting. She didn't
Yeah.
come to us from Olympic weightlifting. I brought her to nationals 2 years ago, and she like got to see a meet for the first time, like all those things. But
Mm.
she's good people. Like you said, I could just give her things and trust her, and she's off to the
Yep.
races. And
Yep.
she does so many things that I don't know about anymore. That she's just a critical part of like our operations, but it's because she's just good people.
Yeah, and it's cool that you mentioned that, because Jerem, who you spoke with, he has a ton of experience in business building and course creation and all of that, but he came from the entrepreneurial space, coaching other entrepreneurs. So he worked
Yeah,
with big educating companies
yeah,
previous. He doesn't really know anything about sports,
yeah,
but that didn't matter for me. It's like we have a lot of different facets of what we do, but the main thing is I just need people around me that are dependable and innovative
yes.
and can, he's on vacation and he teed
Take
up messages to be
initiative.
sent to me on a
Yeah,
schedule
exactly.
while he was gone. I didn't even know he was doing any of that stuff, which is great.
Yeah, that's such a value. Like people who take initiative, they're trustworthy assets. They like people that you would trust to do the things that you do that you find really
Yeah.
valuable. Like you said, like he's on vacation and knew that there's a couple of things he needed to knock out for you. Like those
Yep.
people are they're invaluable.
100%. And I think one of the biggest struggles for all coaches across all sports, all around the world, because we're in 60 plus sports, 140 something countries now, is that first hire.
Yeah,
And because most of us, myself included, and you, right, we're all just kind of individual coaches. And then eventually, if the stars align, we got to bring somebody on to help us out.
mm-hmm.
What was that moment like for you where you got that first teammate,
Yeah,
and are they still with you? That doesn't always happen, but are they still with
right.
you? I'm curious. And then how did you go from 1 to, I guess you said 9 now, right? So,
Yeah, I think first real hire, somebody who actually like wasn't just volunteering, was somebody who has paying.
mm-hmm.
I've always, I don't know who told it to me, but I think it's dead on. Your first hire in your business needs to be somebody who's different, dependable, but different from you. Your second
Mm-hmm.
hire can be somebody who can replace you.
Okay.
And so I don't know who told me that, but I love that. So I hired
Yeah.
somebody very different from me. He actually was the guy that he kind of worked himself. He interned with me for a year, paid for the internship, so I knew he was committed.
Wow.
And then it was his idea to do the webinars over COVID, the
Mm.
continuing ed and all of that. And so he literally almost created his own position because he created this
Yep.
idea that began to generate income, and then we used that idea to help to train other coaches who would then come on staff. So
Okay.
he created his own situation, and now he's still on staff, still running all our continuing education and our webinars. And then my second hire was somebody who's very similar to me. And so that first hire, it didn't so much so that I went and sought him out as much as he just like made it readily clear that he'd be a very good part of the team
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
he was like really committed already.
Yep. Yeah. In the early days of our company, we had people in a very similar position where they just were convincing us that they were the right people, not the other way around,
Yeah.
which is a really special position to be in.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, so let's maybe talk about the high school side of things, because I know a lot of folks start off in that kind of traditional setting in certain sports. I know track and
Yeah.
field, weightlifting, and others, because they have the resources and the kids to do that. Other sports more and more are moving out of high school. A lot of the training and competitive side is not even in certain high schools anymore. But what's the relationship with the school there? Because that's where you started, right?
Yeah.
So I want to maybe ask a better question. So you're with the school there. are you able to train those kids individually in your separate programs as well? Or is there some sort of kind of understanding that you're only going to train them within the confinements of the school?
Yeah, so I'm in a small private school, so I don't have, there are some schools out there where coaches have 4,000 athletes. I have
Mm-hmm.
270,
Okay.
and that's a lot more than I had when I got there.
Mm.
We just made a really good program that's attractive. And so and the thing about the small private school is like when you do small private stuff, generally the best athletes don't play one sport, right? So
Mm-hmm.
because they're so valuable, that if they're valuable in football, they're probably also valuable in baseball and basketball.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you don't have a lot of outside training happening because they train with you during the day and then they got to go to practice.
Right. So there's not even an opportunity unless it's off season, but they don't have much of an off season, it sounds like.
Right. And I don't
Yeah.
have
Mm-hmm.
there's nobody in the weight room at when school's over because they're all on field somewhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or in batting cages or whatever. And so, I don't really have that issue because they don't have to. Now, there have been some athletes who have worked with me who want to try weightlifting, right? They're a volleyball player or a track and field athlete, and they want to also do weightlifting. I'll bring them into my facility after school when that makes sense, and do ancillary training on top of what they're already doing in the school. But that's been like 2 or 3 total people in the course of my career. Most of them, what I do is very separate from what they do at the school not because of anything but just time in the day. Right? They go to practice and then they got to do homework. And they got to get dinner and all that. And so they run out of time too. And like they're getting enough. There's not much that I can offer them that they're not already getting, at the school.
Is working for a small private school something that you would recommend for other folks in your position as a pretty cush and something that maybe some of the coaches out there listening should try to chase down?
Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't, right? If you're at all interested in strength and conditioning, private high schools have a myriad of different attraction points that anybody interested in strength and conditioning should look at. One, they have more resources generally than a public school, right?
100%.
So they're going to have more resources. So you're going to be able to go and get and do things. We have velocity-based training systems in every single one of our racks at the school. So that's pretty odd, right? Like those are really expensive, very high-end technology pieces in every rack we have at the school.
I can imagine.
We also just got like wearable technology that we put on all of our best athletes. It's a big investment from the school and their standpoint. When I need new stuff, I ask the school, and generally they're able to provide me with all the resources that I need at the school. So one, it kind of gives you an open book on what you can do. And two, like the best thing about a private school is they don't have to, there's a lot of red tape that they're able to get around because they're not a public government funded school. And so there's a lot of things that I'm able to do. The fact that I can go spend a week in Las Vegas in the middle of sports training season in the middle of summer is because I'm in a scenario with that kind of flexibility.
Yep.
They do a good job of allowing me, like many private jobs, to kind of flex in and out of what is required of me to be able to support me in things that happen outside the school. And so that wouldn't always be the case with a public school. And I know a lot of guys in public schools are envious of my having to assistants and having the setup that I do because they don't have that because of resources and just protocol, right? If you do it for one school in the county, you got to do it for everybody. And so in private school, you don't have to do that.
Remind me how long you've been working for them?
I'm in my 5th year.
Fifth year. So since it does sound great, is there any kind of general advice that you might give somebody in your position that wants to stand out from the crowd and land a job like that?
Yeah, best thing, obviously there's clear certifications that are gold standards that are really important, right? If you're in the high school world, getting a CSCS, like a certified strength conditioning coach certification like that's like it's a really good gold standard. I think it's, in my mind, like a minimum base to be able to hire somebody that's really, really serious about it, right? They're just not like a fitness coach that wants to do some stuff, right? The other thing I'd say is like having active involvement in strength and conditioning organizations like the National High School Strength and Conditioning Association, things like that, active involvement. Not only will it make your resume look different, but it also connects you to people who will then be able to connect you to open jobs. So the networking piece happens inside the NSCA and the NHSSCA, those organizations for strength and conditioning. That all happens inside those opportunities. And so for most, just being in those circles is a really great start. Yeah. The second thing I'd say is like add a hat. So either be a really good sport coach, right? So like be good at track and field, be able to be the head coach of a basketball team, be able to be the head coach of the volleyball team. Having that added credibility, even though you may not need to do it in the long run, will also make you hireable early, right? So I know a lot of people who got hired as the assistant football coach and strength coach, and now are only the strength coach
I see.
because
So
they did such a good job. They filtered out of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That
So
makes total sense.
Having something that is more than just that also makes you attractive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's jump from the school setting to where most of our audience sits, because most of the folks that use CoachNow or that might be listening to this, whether they do or don't, usually are more of that entrepreneurial mindset, that kind of sole proprietor, maybe academy owner, gym owner, somebody like that. So let's talk a little bit more about your gym and the remote coaching side, because I know in the chat you had with Jerem, a lot of his notes back to me were about that remote coaching side. And I know a lot of folks here are always trying to figure out that balance. So to kind of set a little bit of context too, from what we see, so many coaches get hung up in this lesson side of things, which drives me absolutely nuts. And I qualify lessons as quick fixes and exchanging time for money, and there's no real progress. Right. And I don't know if we coined remote coaching, but I've been saying it for so long, I've almost convinced myself that we came up with it, but I don't know if that's true.
Right.
But there's a big difference between remote coaching and online lessons.
Yes.
And then for you, there's people that you're seeing in the gym, and then you're monitoring their progress and coaching them in between those times. Yeah. So this is a pretty open-ended question, so I'll try to reel it back in. Talk to me about how the remote coaching specifically, all those folks that you don't see ever, or at least maybe once a year, once a month, very infrequently. Right. Talk to me about that side of your business, how it's evolved, and as open as you want to be, talk me through some of the offers that you've constructed, right? So the financial side of it as much as you can to say, hey, I'm going to give you this if you pay this, and this is the program. That would be, immensely helpful if you can share that.
So I would tell you we have a gym, like a brick and mortar place that people do train in person. But there are only about 15% of our entire company train here in person with me. Everybody else is remote. When I got into weightlifting, I knew and still believe that the best coaching happens in person. And so being able to monitor, give instantaneous feedback, see measurable change right there on the moment is instant. It's like it is the best, but it's not a qualified option for a lot of people in this world. To have a qualified coach, to be able to afford it. All those things. And so when we started down the remote coaching trail, I knew that I wasn't willing to sacrifice a lot of the advantages of an in-person coach. And so we had to create a system that could get, obviously wouldn't be the same, but it's a system that could get closer or as close as possible. And so what we did was we thought about what are all the things that happen in person. So more than just a personalized written program, right? More than just that, what else happens in person? Well, you get a coach who's able to be agile enough emotionally to engage with you relationally and in order to elicit a certain change, right? I'm not going to talk to one athlete who's very driven, motivated by winning the same way as somebody motivated by processes. And so, how do I create that kind of and inform coaches so that coaches can engage in feedback in that way? That was a big question. Also, we see with our eyes in person a lot more than what we see in a video they text us. And so what do we see? Well, we see imbalances. We see movement patterns that are different. So how do I create a scenario where we at least have a base for what we're working with, right? How do I get a glance at those imbalances and movements way before we start writing programming? And then ultimately we wanted to know, is there a way that I could give 3 different types of feedback to an athlete at any given point in time? How could I give them visual feedback, verbal feedback, and then readable, feedback that they could read and remember type of thing? And so that's when we created the whole process, right? So when you join our team, we do a remote physical analysis, assessment. We have a doctor that tells them to film X, Y, and Z videos. He looks at them, reviews them, gives them verbal feedback and a written summary back. We also get that feedback. So now I know from the jump, what am I looking at from an athlete? That's a personalized look at where they start at. Also, we created a 4-week like introductory program that helps us learn like where their work capacity is. How do they respond to high intensity lifting? How do they respond to like bring them real low and letting them rest? And so I got some concept of where they are physiologically. And then we also added, I stole this from our special forces in the United States, but also some like federations around the world. We added in a behavior analysis. So they fill out a survey of sorts. We get behavior analysis back. This isn't like, oh, well, I'm energetic or I'm hyper. No, this is like, how do I respond to stressors? How do I respond to training? What is my self-image? Those kinds of things, so that we can then cater our feedback to them. So we know what they're motivated by. We know what they fear. We know what makes them feel comfortable. And then ultimately we added CoachNow as well, which is an opportunity for us to have a one-on-one interpersonal relationship with an athlete via an app, be able to give them verbal, visual, and like readable feedback that then they can review whenever they want.
Right.
That we created that system in response to this great need for remote coaches and athletes. And I don't think it obviously is not the same as in person, but I don't know that I've seen any system out there that gets as close as we get to both like interpersonal relationships and like seeing like clear measurable change in the right direction from an athlete other than that system. And we're always reviewing and revising and changing and adding and deleting things as they see fit to that system. But when you go to a national championships and you see this athlete that you've only seen once or twice a year and you have a relationship with them that feels like you see them every day, that's like the affirmation for us that we've kind of transcended this like remote feel and we're a little more involved in their life.
I want to pull on that thread a little bit because you said it a couple times and it's so important to me and why we built what we built, but the term relationship. And far too often, a lot of folks that hopefully will listen to this fall into the trap of, hey, send me a video. I'll draw a bunch of lines on it, tell you a bunch of stuff, and good luck.
Yeah.
And generally what in any sport, tennis, baseball, weightlifting, whatever it is, in those exchanges, it's let me basically tell you how bad you are at whatever you're doing and send you on your way to figure it out. Right. And then you can contact me later at some other time and I'll draw a bunch more lines and tell you how bad you are now.
Right.
Instead of using that opportunity as an assessment like you described, and then creating a program, but more importantly, establishing a relationship and an understanding that this is going to be some form of long-term relationship, depending on your goals and your resources and everything else. So kind of talk me through how you view the relationship of coach to athlete, and also how you're able to instill that level of importance into your staff too, because really, I think that's the secret sauce is if people know how much you care, that's the most important part, I think.
Yeah. So the truth is like relationships form so much of the foundation for longevity for an athlete and a coach. So if you don't have a great relationship, there's no established trust. If you don't have great experiences, then there's no desire to repeat those experiences. If you don't have like a culture with that athlete of, hey, I'm just as like emotionally invested in your progress as you are, then that athlete's going to feel less loyal and not as connected. And so for us, like, we just want to make sure that we establish a relationship where those things can still happen. Where we have moments in training where I can like that. I just did this today. An athlete finally did what I've been trying to get her to do for 6 weeks. And I almost jumped through the phone. I was so excited, but she got to hear my diction. She got to hear my excitement and my how proud I was of her. That's way better than great job, ! You know?
You can't convey emotion through text, right? You got to do the video and one way or the other.
And I'm not saying that texting isn't a good means for coaching, but it is. It's just not the only, and it's not even in my sense. Like it cannot be the sole sense. And so she got to hear me be excited, which means like she could feel from me that like she had done something well, and that establishes trust and consistency, and that establishes an opportunity for us to grow together. And she see this as a journey where both of us are doing it rather than just her and getting some like outside advice. My temptation is just what you said. My temptation is pull up the video, tell you the 7 things you did wrong, send, and move on to the next athlete. I've gotten really good feedback both from my staff because I hired good people, and from some of my athletes who are bold enough to say, hey, like all I do is hear the bad things. All I do is hear the bad things. And so that's a good encouragement to me to like, not even just tell them good things, but for them to be able to sense a sense in which, hey, I'm harping on this issue because I care about it as much as you do.
Yeah.
Or for them to sense from me like, hey, I'm as proud of you doing this as I've ever been for you. And you can hear that and sense that. And so finding ways to like, that's the beauty of voiceover and being able to hear people's voices is you can really sense the relationship growth. And so for me, like just always encouraging my staff, and we do this once a month with our staff, we talk about ways to like have emotional agility in order to be able to engage with athletes so that they feel they're on a journey with you as a coach, not just a journey that also has this like outsourced helper.
Yes. How are you doing, or how should I put this? How do you feel you're doing in passing that same level of understanding back to the athlete? And we'll talk about the technical pieces of the movement, right? So there's one thing for you to draw a bunch of lines. That's the beginning of every relationship because they don't even know up from down in a lot of cases. And then over time, they should be able to look at their own video and go, yep, I see that. So how much are you passing the autonomy to them to then draw lines and do voiceovers and educate themselves so that you're not directing and maybe more so calibrating?
Yeah. So that's kind of a new, remember, just really started rolling on this in COVID.
Yep.
So that's kind of the new thing we're seeing is now, and one of my coaches rightly pointed this out to me. She was an Olympian, so went to the Olympics 2016, and then rightly pointed out that like there's a need for athlete independence of their coach. Like they've got to be able to be competitive and able to be in the gym and do everything they're supposed to do without this like incessant need to look to their right immediately and see if they did it right.
Oh my gosh!
They got to be able to feel it. They got to be able to see it. And so she kind of came back a little bit where I'm like, I don't know, like I feel like we should always tell them. She's like, should you or should they be able to see it?
Yep.
And so one of the things we're working on is like, we're working on finding ways to encourage, like literally tell an athlete, hey, when you see something and you post a video in your space, why don't you write in there, like what you see?
100%.
And either we can affirm it. Like, hey, we see that too. That's a great point. And that happens naturally with some athletes if you have a good relationship with them. Like I had an athlete this past week at national championships who said, hey, just he told me, hey, as I'm warming up, make sure and watch for this specific thing because we'd been working on that specific thing for the block, right? And he was saying in his videos, like, hey, I think I got my knees back really well on this one or whatever, right? And so like they'll do that naturally, but encouraging athletes to become coaches in their own eyes, like to see their own lifts, is something we just had to be intentional about. You just got to tell them, hey, listen, when you see something, be sure to like type that in. We'll either affirm it or we'll say, yes, like here's what might have caused that. Because we want, this is brand new for us. Like we want our athletes to be able to see their own lifts in the same light that we see them. So A, they're not like absolutely dependent on us. And B, it makes them valuable in whatever setting they're also in. So they become then good coaches for other people. I mean, you develop this like coaching chain. All of our coaches that are on our staff were once athletes on our staff. And so they all kind of began to see what we see and then became great coaches. I think for us it's two-faceted. Them be able to be independent of the coach enough that they don't need affirmation of what they think they're seeing, but they see it. And then also get to a point where we're able to like lean on them and trust them to be able to see what we see.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would say after seeing hundreds of thousands of coaches and millions of posts in our system, the absolute best practice, the coaches that are the happiest, the athletes that are happiest are when a coach refuses at a certain point to even accept or look at a video without the athlete's context wrapped into it somehow.
That's good.
Right. So for me, as a golf coach and the guy that, built this thing and has been using it a long time, I was and still coach a few people. And if in the beginning of a relationship, if anybody posts just a swing, with nothing, right? I go, what am I supposed to get from this? Right. This is one swing and one moment of time. Give me what the ball do? How did it feel? What do you think? Give me context. Otherwise I can't give you feedback.
That's good onus on them, right? Like that puts good onus on them so that they have to be as involved in development as you are.
I will not coach, and I will stand by this 100%. with every coach that I talk to, because we run these educational courses about the business of coaching. And one of the things that's always surprising for coaches is when I say, if they're not willing to do the work in the relationship agreement that we've set up, if they're not following in that process that we've agreed upon, I'm not going to coach them. It's just not going to happen. Right. Because especially in the junior athlete world, which you spend a lot of time in, but especially like the high performance ones that are seeing you in your gym individually, mom and dad come in and go, well, so-and-so isn't performing in the way that we thought they would. Because, well, look, they haven't even posted. And when they post, they don't even give me any information. Like, they're not taking ownership of this.
Right.
We're working on the same grip mechanics or the same stance mechanics for the last 2 months.
Yeah,
right.
There's no ownership.
There's no ownership. So the way that we usually describe it, or the way that I describe it, is kind of this directive versus calibrative feedback. In the beginning, you're going to direct a bunch, but as soon as you can, you want to switch it to calibrative. They're taking ownership, and you're tweaking the rocket, so to speak, instead of telling them all the things to do. And from a straight business perspective, that allows you to actually have a lot more clients.
Yeah, it gives you way more space and bandwidth.
Way more. And the ones that are in that calibrative space at this point with you are still getting immense value, and they're still going to stay with you, because nobody fires a coach because they got too good at whatever they hired them for. I don't see that happening.
No.
Right. So if they only need to communicate with you 10 minutes in total a month, but the beauty of CoachNow is that you can have these micro connections, these little touch points, right? Where a little voiceover from you might hold them over for 2 weeks because they're so excited working on that, but it only took you 2 minutes, right?
Right.
But now you've got all this space for so many more people to work with, get them into the directive phase, and then move them to calibrative phase. And now you've got hundreds and hundreds of people like you do now.
Yeah.
Instead of 10 that you have to hold the hand over. And
right. Right. Because the
brutal.
truth is, for someone like me, I'm not just like, it's just one facet of our coaching relationship is CoachNow. Like there's a lot of other facets, programming and adjustments and all those things. So being able to make them calibrative in that sense, like really does, it's going to give them a better like training session, because they're going to feel things and see things earlier at way before they get to top weights. And also like it's going to give you a little more space to do things that you also need to be doing with that athlete and with others.
Yeah. And I think someone in your position, a lot of it just boils down to asking questions eventually.
Yeah.
Rather than telling them things. Right. And
right. What do you see in this lift? What are you thinking about when this bar happened?
Especially because your sport and golf are, I think, more similar than not. They're very so similar. Technical. Right. Yeah. And golf, you can't get nearly as hurt as, you can get hurt if you do it wrong, but
right. I mean, I can drop a bar in your head.
The consequences are a bit gnarlier in your sport.
Yes.
So I think passing that ownership onto them is so important, and then encouraging them to journal or recap, right? And that's one of the things that you hit on a minute ago, which I think is so powerful about video, is it shouldn't just be all about drawing lines on things.
Right.
It should be about learning moments. It should be about conveying emotion. Yeah. So for me, someone in your sport, I would send, if I was your athlete, right, I would send you me lifting from the camera angles that you've told me to lift. I would be doing the things you told me to do. And then I would also send you a recap video of me talking directly to camera, going, hey, this is what I felt like today. This is what I learned today. Doing my own voiceover potentially. That way, I as an athlete are taking complete ownership. And when I look back, because I'm struggling, all athletes go up and down, you have the plateaus and whatever.
Yeah.
A video of you at your most hyped because you hit your PR today or whatever it might be. Those are such powerful moments.
Yes.
Whereas you can't really convey that with a piece of text. Right.
Like
you're saying.
I agree. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we had a natural lull there from that.
Right. So I'm in my head, I'm already like revive, because we're working on this as a staff right now. Like, cause I'm like, I want to be able to set a standard for our coaches, like how much engagement, how much is like a coaching are we acquiring, but at the same level, they're pushing back saying, hey, aren't we creating dependence? Is there a way in which we can show something different, that kind of stuff. So this it's a very interactive piece for us right now as we're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and I can tell you, and this is something that's been behind closed doors for quite some time, but we're going to be releasing it just out in the public anyway. And I'll share it with you now because someone would have to listen to this whole thing to find it. Uh, but generally, the way that we kind of structure this and what we call connected coaching is, if you think about the 15% of your business that's in person, right?
Yeah.
There's a clear opportunity to make those folks, if we're just talking about the numbers and cents of it, incredibly valuable to you guys.
Yeah.
And in doing so, it's a mixture of in-person and remote time. And so as an example from a lot of other sports, it would be, we're going to see each other 2 hours a month in person. And then we're going to do a 30-minute Zoom call or something else for the other part of the month. Those are our live interactions that we have.
Yeah.
And then twice a week, I will analyze videos for you and answer a couple questions.
Yeah.
And now that program, no matter what sport you're in, that's a $400 to $500 a month program.
Right.
You only need 20 or so people at that price point. Now you're $100K, right? And that's a big threshold for a lot of coaches, is that $100,000 mark.
Right.
Because we ran a survey, and sadly, most coaches are somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 a year.
Right. It's true.
And we don't want that for anybody.
Nope.
And so our big passion is, okay, how can we consolidate the in-person time, which is so important, and then monitor and calibrate the rest of the time, delivering value, and get people on a subscription-based coaching plan versus like some folks an hourly. So talk me through the if you can, just a little bit of the dollars and cents of it.
Yeah.
In the offers that you're creating. Are you setting up a minimum commitment for folks? Are you charging a monthly, like I hope you are?
Yes.
How are you going about doing this?
Yeah, so our minimum commitment is the first month. We believe that inside that first month, we can deliver a product that they'll want to stick with forever, and so far that's been absolutely true. We're on an annual or a monthly subscription based on number of workouts per week. So if they work out 3 times a week, it's $140 a month recurring. If it's
and that's for people that are going to the physical space.
No,
right?
That's for remote, completely remote. $140.
Okay, so can you define a workout then? For me?
So that would be so on a, let's see, if I'm an athlete and I have higher power and grace for 3 times a week workout, they'll get a program from us that gives them 3 workouts to do that week. They'll complete that workout in whatever gym they're in, whether it's in their home or another gym that they're at, and they'll film what they believe to be the most important sets or the top sets, or the top, and then they'll toss that into Space and CoachNow. We guarantee some sort of interaction or feedback on 1 or 2 of those videos a day, not all of them. So if you film 18 and put them in there, like, we're not even going to watch all of them.
I like how you got the minimum set. That's super important.
Yeah. We're not telling them. They know that coming in. Like, you're more than welcome to put them in there to save for your own keeping.
100%.
But we're not engaging in anything that you don't tell us is super important and that we think may be redundant.
Good.
And so 3 times a week. So from a time standpoint, remote coaching, you're looking at maybe 4 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, three times a week for that.
Yep.
So it's pretty doable, right? From a remote coaching standpoint. And so you can do that for 3 days a week for 140. You can do that for 4 days a week for 210, and then you can do 5 days at 275.
Okay.
And so we have athletes all across that gamut. When they come in, they sign up, they do an interview with me. Every athlete that comes into our program does an interview with me. I then assign them to a coach. The coach starts that process we talked about. We get behavior analysis and physical assessment and initial acclimation data, and then they're off to the races. To train in person, they just pay $100 gym membership fee to be here in person.
Okay.
And so if I pay $100, but then I still, on top of that, I have to have another membership to pay for the programming and the other remote coaching if I'm gone or any of that. So the gym membership itself is just an add-on to anything else that they have. So at the very base of what we do, you got to have a programming membership that comes with remote coaching, even if you're in person. Beautiful. Right. So if you travel or if I'm gone or whatever, we still have that relationship continuing. And then that gym membership just allows them into this location. Now, if I want to come in, and this happens a lot, if I want to come in, I live in Oregon and I want to come to Georgia to train for a month, we'll create a 1 month package for them to pay for membership for here for the month. They'll train for a month, still keep their remote coaching going. Because a lot of them want to be able to drop videos into that space because they refer back to it and put tags on it and all that stuff.
Yep.
And so that's kind of how the pricing structure works. We were a little cheaper than that. And then COVID created great demand, and we got to a point where we were out of coaches and had a waiting list. The way you facilitate that is that you can do one of two things. You can increase your capacity, or you can increase your price. And so we increased our price a little bit. We still saw some, but we were able to come up even with the marketplace. Before we were below marketplace pricing. And so, everybody was attracted to us. We were the cheapest guys on the block.
Yeah.
But then what happened when we came up even with the marketplace, one, it legitimatized a lot of our coaches. And two, at that moment, people who were reaching out to us were willing to make an investment in themselves, not just looking for the cheap fix. And so we've gotten a lot of really high quality athletes because they don't see it as just like a cheap thing, that it's not like a gold gym membership, right? It's a investment in themselves.
It seems like, given your results, right? If you were just, and we should talk about that in a minute, actually, because I think that's an important aspect for everybody, is to understand the results that you are creating for people. Obviously, it depends on what their goals are to start. But given what I've heard, and we'll talk about it again in a minute, are you looking at raising those prices yet again? Because it seems like there's an appetite, especially, Olympic weightlifting has never been more popular. And if you just if I look at it as a dummy who doesn't know anything about it, I just look in our system. We're having Olympic weightlifting spaces created all the time. Yeah. So there's clearly a demand for it. And it seems like, because it is so specialized, that those prices could be even higher. I don't know, but it seems like it.
Yeah, I think when we break there's a certain threshold that we're looking to break, and we break that threshold and get a little more international. I think we could see that could be a conversation that we have as a staff. Luckily, like I've got directors now, so I have direct reports that then between like a year ago it was just me and Adam. It's like now it's like I have directors over departments, and those departments have things that they're in charge of and people that are underneath them, and so. We have direct report meetings, and when those meetings happen, we type these conversations. When it gets to the point where my director of coaching is like, "Hey, we're overwhelmed. We don't have any more space. Our coaches can't do more. I feel like they're maybe taxed a little bit. We're watering down the product." That kind of thing starts to happen, which is what happened before. Then that conversation will be for real. I also think there's a scenario where we end up going international and needing more coaches to be able to do that. We would see an increase there. We haven't reached that threshold just yet. And I also don't want to be too far. I don't want to be too far above the marketplace, because I don't want us to be inaccessible for an athlete who's looking for a really great experience. So for me, there's some accessibility pieces in there that I don't want to go too far from. And I learned that in a private school, right? So there's as part of the private school, you got to pay X amount of dollars to be there. And yet that sometimes can be a barrier to entry for people that really would be great fits for the school. Same concept for us. Like I don't want to be so inaccessible that we're not accessible to athletes who would be a great fit for us philosophically and great fit for us culturally. So it's a balance that we got to figure out.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And every business goes through this, us included. You're always kind of just looking at the market, trying to understand what's what. One of the things that seems to come out in a lot of these conversations is that you, as the founder, the head coach, the expert amongst your group, one of the things that usually comes out is, how do we position you in that way? One of the ways to do that is to change your rates.
Yeah.
Right. Is that something you guys have explored, or something that you are currently doing, where you're kind of off to the side a little bit and people have to qualify to work with you?
We did that. So the rates that we currently charge for everybody used to be my rates. And then we moved everybody to that. I do think there's a scenario. You're talking about what we're talking about. There's a scenario where our senior level coaches who are coaching athletes at the international level, at the highest level, doing with the most complex procedures, could be classified as having to charge a little more. And so then you restructure pricing, and then you're able to bring coaches in and be able to ensure that they're able to provide it with athletes at a certain price point. And then for the athlete that either A, makes an international level and wants to go up to that point, or like you find a way where their success drives that and we scholarship them up as far as accessibility goes. So part of it is like balancing that again, we're talking about, it's 2022. In 2019, it was two of us.
Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of level at which my coaches are gaining the experience that I want them to gain that I just gained in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And so I have such a reminder to myself to not see this, but to see like the 20-year thing.
Yeah.
Where those coaches have been to 2 Olympics now.
Yes.
And they've got international experience that outdoes me right now. Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to not see yourself as experienced when really it's only been 3 or 4 years
right.
of the level at which I would consider myself experienced. But in 10 or in 15 years, you may end up with coaches who have coached at 12 world championships and 3 Olympics. And then you're talking about having real classifications versus compared to the guy who just started coaching for you last week.
Right.
Compared to that. And so part of it is that gap's going to get bigger, and then you're going to be able to really separate those price points out more. We just got to give it time. I think I'm doing everything I can to make sure we're just not a flash in the pan.
Totally.
We're just trying to create foundational sort of roadblocks that keep us productive and healthy and moving in the right direction, creating that flywheel effect. So I think part of me is like, yes, but like I'm not so quick to jump yet kind of thing.
Yep, absolutely. One other question I have for you is around evergreen content, right?
Yeah.
So accessibility is an important thing.
Yeah.
Not everyone is ready to get personalized coaching for whatever reason. It is difficult to create evergreen content that someone can plug into. I'm curious if you guys are talking about that. Seems like, given your level of programming, that somebody could plug into a generic program and have at least moderate success.
Yeah, so we have 2 programs that do that. We have a silver and a bronze package where if I'm looking to work out 3 days a week, I can pay $20 a month. I join a CoachNow group, truly like a group instead of a space. I have 2 coaches that then interact with people occasionally throughout that group, but also that group interacts with each other. We've built their own little small online community. Same thing for silver, but it's 5 days a week. Both are competition-based programmings. We do like, I said we're going to do one thing really well. We're not going to do 7 things kind of well. We're going to do one thing, competition weightlifting. And so each of those programs are still built to designed to help an athlete compete in the sport of weightlifting. They're just done at a more general level. And so if I got time to work out 3 days a week, I work out 3 days a week, and I do it on this bronze program for $20 a month. Silver is $50 a month. I still get engaged in the community. I still get some interaction from an athlete and a coach. I'm just not getting the personalized level.
And those are so ripe to then go to the personal level, right?
Yeah. And we've seen a lot of people upgrade.
Yeah. I mean, you've got such a great foundation, and I knew some of these answers, but I'm asking you them because everyone needs to hear them.
Yeah.
Because far too often coaches are not focused on the multiple streams of income side of things. They're like, oh, well, now I need to become a famous YouTuber. And it's like, no, you don't. I mean, you could. I mean, that's fine. But within your own offer, within your own expertise, your own community, there's a myriad of things that you can sell them to keep them engaged, and you can upgrade and downgrade them depending on, where they are in their life and their training cycles. So I'm so happy to hear that you're doing that, because you have a lot of the foundational pieces already established, which is so cool. So as we kind of get closer to wrapping up, I've never been to the Olympics. You went, yes?
I did. Yeah,
I know your athletes did, but I know travel was a little bit dicey, right? So
understatement of the year.
Share. I mean, this is a little off topic, but I know anybody listening to this would love to hear, what that experience is like.
Oh my gosh. I mean, truly, we'll never do it again. Like, I hope, gosh, cross your fingers, never do it again. But obviously the Olympics were delayed a year. So we were planning on Tokyo 2020. In my world, you don't plan in months, you plan in quads. So you plan in 4-year chunks. And so when I write athletes programs that have a shot at the Olympics, I'm doing it with a progression in mind for 2020. Well, 2020 didn't happen. 2021 happened. Yeah. And so you kind of have to reset and get innovative and redo a bunch of stuff and then hope. And the problem was, like, so you would get there and like, all right, we have our next competition to this date. And then you'd get 2 months out and be like, actually, just kidding, we canceled it. And then you plan for the next one. Oh, just kidding, we canceled that one. Oh, just kidding, we canceled. So it was like constantly this like reevaluate. How do you stay?
And are these all the competitions kind of leading up to the Olympics? Like
all
the
the qualifying ones. All the qualifying ones changed. The last year of qualification was a mess. And so when we finally got to where it was time for Tokyo, we were just like so ready, regardless of how it was going to feel, regardless of what the experiences we thought we were going to have. We were just so ready to do it. There was a lot of red tape, right? A lot. I mean, got COVID tested every single day, every single day. A lot of athletes and teams that we knew of that got put in quarantine and all this and all that. So there was a lot of we couldn't leave the village. When we did leave the village, we were leaving in a bus. We saw Tokyo through a bus window, and then we saw our venue. We didn't get to go to other sports. I didn't get to go watch beach volleyball. I didn't get to go watch gymnastics, which is a big bummer, right? The experience you'd hope to have, you didn't get to have. And so I think a lot of athletes are training for Paris because they hope to have that experience that they didn't get to have. But in the same sentence, man, when we were there, we were just happy the Olympics were happening. Because there was a phase there where we thought man, we trained our whole lives for this and it wasn't going to happen. Yeah. And so I had 3 athletes compete there, so I got to be there for a long time. You do get to rub elbows with a lot of athletes. One of the coolest experiences is to walk into the Olympic Village and realize you just look to your left and look to your right, and there's 10,000 of the fittest people on the planet, all from different countries, different languages, different. I was a white American, and I was the minority in the Olympic Village. That was super cool. It was just a lot of that did get to happen. You would wake up and you would hear teams doing a chant as they walked to breakfast.
Cool.
And all of that did get to happen. So outside of the actual competition, which, kind of felt like a world championships with no spectators.
Right.
There was some stuff in the village that felt man, this is the most diverse place I'll ever be in my life.
That's so cool. And from what I recall, you had some medal winners, yes?
Yeah. So Kate got a silver medal, which we were over the moon about.
God, that's got to be so cool.
It doesn't set in until you see her on the podium, and that's when it changes. My guy Harrison had the best competition of any male in the United States for Olympic weightlifting and was 1 lift away from a bronze. So that was super cool to be in that fight. I mean, and his weight class in the world is the most competitive. It's perennially the one everybody watches. So for him to be in the fight with some of the best in the world, at 21 years old was a huge.
Wow, I was going to ask you how old he is. So he's
he's 21.
What's the life cycle of a weightlifter typically?
Physiologically, life cycle if you're a guy, you could probably make it till maybe 30 or 30. So. A girl, you could see some women do 33, 34. Our best weightlifter is 37. She's one of the best in the world.
Wow. Okay.
But Harrison's different. Harrison said, he'd been lifting since he was 9 years old. And he said from the jump, hey, I'm doing 1 Olympics and then I'm going to school. I'm going to be a surgeon. And he did. He held true to his word. Wow. He finished. And he gave me a hug, loved me, and said, I'm out. And he went to school and has not looked back since. And to his credit, he said,
that's impressive.
Is my commitment, which is when you're that close to a medal, to be able to say,
that is impressive.
You know what? I got all I wanted. He had the best performance of his life on the Olympic stage. And in his mind, he said, hey, I don't know that that's an experience I want to redo, right? Medal or no medal. I want to go to school. I want to be a doctor. I want to serve the community through that. And so he did. I've talked to him since. He's as happy as I've ever seen him. So
wow,
crazy.
That's amazing. Yeah,
the other 2 are still training. They're training for Paris, but he said I'm out. And he held true to his word. I didn't think there's any chance. I thought when he was that close, there's no way he wouldn't do it again.
Yeah, especially with his age and everything.
Yeah,
man, that's incredible. Well, what an experience, and I know so many coaches would love to just be a part of that. And sounds like you're going to get to go again.
Yeah, it looks like it. We've got a lot of, fingers crossed, we got a lot of horses in the race here. So as you get closer, obviously, if you have 12, it gets down to 6. You sort of end up with whoever ends up going. They're only taking 3 women and 3 men this Olympics. So a lot narrower barrier of entry. But I feel good about where our athletes are at and the places they're at. We don't even start qualifying until December of this year.
Okay, got it.
So we're still training right now. It is very hard for an athlete that went to the Olympics because they lost a year of kind of rest time.
Good. Yeah.
So if they were going to compete in 2020, they would have gotten 2021 to really rest and do some fun stuff and all of that. I think that played a lot into Harrison's decision. But so they're having to get started back up a year sooner than anybody would have planned for them. And so that's obviously a challenge when you're competing against people who, really had all that time to prep and didn't have to do the Olympics. So unique challenge, but after COVID years, I feel like they're probably up for any sort of flexibility.
Let's just do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Man,
for
well,
sure.
I've got one more question for you that I typically kind of round out on. I mean, I think we could talk for a lot longer, but I want to be respectful of your time and the audience here. But you've seen, from what I can tell, a massive shift in your career trajectory over these last few years, and you were
Yeah,
one of not a lot, I should say, that were ready and took COVID on as an opportunity instead of just shuttering the doors. Because we've
yeah,
seen I mean, we had a huge influx in the CoachNow world. I mean, we grew faster than we ever had during those initial months. But I can't tell you how many coaches just completely just fell off because they weren't prepared. They had no technology.
right,
They had, whether it's CoachNow or anything, they were all lessons. Hey, come and I'll teach you in person. And that was it. So they had no foundational
right,
setup to make sure that they were mitigating their risk.
right.
So I kind of say this to say that if you're looking at a new coach coming into your industry or generally any industry that you're interested in, what kind of advice would you give them, having been through everything that you've been through over these last few years? Is there anything that kind of really stands out to you that they should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I would say just immediately there's three things. When I took my very first job right out of high school, first desk job, had a salary, all of that. One of my best friends came into my office, sat down a dog chew toy that looks like Gumby. He sat it down on my desk, and I was like, John, why that? And he said, just Semper Gumby. And I was like, what does that mean? He said, always be flexible.
Ah,
And so that thing still sits on my desk to
wow.
this
Okay.
day to remind me to be flexible. And that was paid off big time through COVID. The second thing I'd say is differentiate what you're good at. Right? Be able to offer more than one thing. So, like I said with the high school coach, like you could be really good at strength and conditioning, but also be able to be proficient and good at another sport, for instance, to be
Mm-hmm.
able to get you in the door. Now, you may narrow that field. Right? When we started Power and Grace, I was coaching a lot of different things,
Yep.
and then we narrowed to weightlifting. Be able to be proficient at wear a couple hats. That'll get you
But you took
hired,
it
and then
even more narrow, right? You went
oh
from
yeah,
many things to weightlifting to now competitive weightlifting, right?
right. So I mean, I
Yeah.
started as a funnel, and then when I saw what the market was, and then I saw what we were good at, and then I saw what we saw
Yes.
results at, then I funneled down.
Yep.
Um, and in many ways, and this is my third point. When you give up things that you're good at to do what you're great at, as a coach or as a business person, don't see that as a failure.
Yeah.
It was hard for me. It was really hard for me to not see those other things, whether it was fitness training or running a gym or just coaching soccer players. Um, to not see myself as a failure because I didn't achieve the results I wanted to see in that field, or I wasn't coaching those people anymore. To not see myself as a failure, I wasn't failing. I was hyper focusing.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was just to be reminded, like, hey, Spencer, you're not failing here. You're doing what you're really good at, and you're able to provide an opportunity for you to do it better. So those are the three things I would say: is make
Yeah.
yourself marketable, be flexible, and then don't see things you give up to do other things that you do better as failures.
Yeah, that refinement I think is so important, and for a lot of people, super super scary,
Yeah,
right? Because strength and conditioning, I think, could be somewhat as vague and even maybe even more
it
vague
is.
than golf, right? I coach golf, right? So okay, well, what does that mean,
Yeah,
right? Or I coach tennis, okay, but strength and conditioning, I think, is so broad
yeah,
that you really got to narrow it down to something.
yeah. I
And
would liken
how
it.
long did it take you to narrow it down to where you are today? Was it 4 years or is it
It was 3 or 4 years,
okay?
but it took doing a lot of things to see what I was particularly good at and what I had the most success in. I would
Mm,
liken it to someone who's a golf coach realizing like they're actually really good at teaching someone to use the driver.
right,
Um,
exactly right.
and then slowly over time, people come to them for this is my driver coach. Like he can do it
Yep,
with the driver. And then you just
yep.
all of a sudden you're not terrible as a irons coach.
You're a
You're just
generalist,
really
yeah, but you
good.
have your
You're just
specialty.
really good at driving
Yeah, yeah.
coaching. Same concept for us, right? We did a bunch of coaching for CrossFitters who were going to the CrossFit games, a
Mm,
bunch of coaching for strength and conditioning people who were playing Division I sports, and then we did competitive weightlifting and competitive weightlifting. And over the course of time, like I started to see people progress towards being Olympians in weightlifting, and not the other things weren't progressing.
yeah,
And that's when I saw like clearly this is our niche. I don't hate doing it. I love it. this is my niche. Like, we're going to do that. And that's when I said, now it's easy to tell people when they reach out, like, oh, I'm just interested in learning about the snatch. Well, we're interested in you learning about the snatch too, just not with us. Right. If you're not trying to compete in the sport, there's a lot of great people out there that can teach you how to snatch. But if you're trying to do it so that you can compete in it, we're your people. And so, but it took like getting to the point where we were okay financially, and we were okay to take that leap because of the reputation we were establishing.
And the last part of this one for me, do you feel like where you are today, because you sound like the epitome of the coaches that we love to work with, where you're always refining, always learning, you have a growth mindset for you and your team, which is so great. Where do you think your marketing stands with where your internal messaging is? And to clarify what I'm saying, to ask it a different way, it's, you want competitive weightlifters. That's what you do. How do you feel like your marketing and your lead generation is doing in conveying that message? Do you feel like it's as accurate as you want?
Yeah, if you Google Power and Grace Performance, you'll see competitive weightlifters. That's what you'll see. Instagram, any of our social, our website, that's what you'll see. That is not to my credit. I eventually hired I hired both our operations people who know way more about marketing and brand creation and brand development than I do. And then I just trusted them with the reins because, like you said, they're good people. They do great work. I trusted them with it. And now they ask, we hired a media person, like a photographer, video person, who like makes sure that the content we put out is competition weightlifting. And our coaches, when they talk about it and it gets put on our branding, they're talking about competition weightlifting and caring about athletes in competition, right? We're not saying podiums. We're caring about people over podiums, but it's people in competition that we're after, for sure.
You nailed it. I mean, you guys are killing it. It's so great to talk to somebody like yourself that really has all of these things put together, and it's just going to be a matter of time for you just to keep growing.
Remembering, it feels like it happened overnight. It's important for me to remember that, like, that quote unquote overnight success took 10 years of building.
Yeah.
And so, like, we weren't an overnight success. It just saw success after 10 years of work.
Yeah.
And so remembering that, so that knowing that growth that happens over the course of 25 years is good growth. Right. And so some of it's just like being patient, that we have these financial and these like other goals we want to achieve. Just being patient, realizing that like a 3% growth every year for 30 years is really, really good.
I cannot emphasize that enough. And the bummer that I always run into is that we're in the software world.
Yeah.
People only like hockey sticks that go almost backwards because you're growing so fast, the hockey stick falls over.
No.
And for me, my parents are restaurant owners, and it's like, man, you give me a restaurant that's growing 20 to 30% year over year, which is not even possible because you don't have enough space and you just have to open more restaurants. But you give me a business that's growing at that rate, sign me up forever.
Right.
So I think you absolutely have the right mindset when I look at somebody like Patagonia, where it's like, we just 1% a year.
Yeah.
We're 100-year business, man.
If you look at the companies that have that like hockey stick backwards motion, and they're still creating success, like they didn't go up and die immediately. If you look at those companies, look at their financial revenue for the 10 years before you saw that spike. Mm-hmm. What you'll probably see is consistency, and then they figured something out, and then they saw the growth. Yeah, so it's important to not see just if you cut the graph off and only see this, like, oh, they're incredible. Right? Everybody, we want to be just like that in a year. Like, you forget that there's an executive in there somewhere that spent 10 or 15 years trying to figure it out.
Yep.
And so 1% to 2% growth may cause a spike later. I think we're living in that spike right now. But if it plateaus out and we're still at 2 to 3% every single year for the rest of our lives, like, that's fantastic.
I mean, you're building a responsible, sustainable business, and you're helping a lot of people out. Yeah. That's the dream. That's absolutely the dream. Well, Spencer, you've been full of nuggets, man. So this is going to be fun to go through and chop them out and then release the whole episode. So thanks so much for taking the time. Really cool to talk to you.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And thanks for being such a great ambassador of what we do. And let's figure out more ways to help you guys out and work together.
Yeah. Love you guys. I mean, there's so much of what I just said is a result of you guys creating a product that we have found so much value in.
Thank you for saying that, man. Well, congrats to you guys, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, man.
All right. Thanks, Spencer.